Story 1. The Last Trick-or-Treat Stop. It was Halloween night, 2019, when 11-year-old Jacob and his friends decided to visit one last house before heading home. The street was nearly empty, the orange glow of porch lights fading as the night grew colder. They came to a house at the end of the block dark, with no decorations, no pumpkins, no sign of life. But just as they were about to turn away, the porch light flicked on. A tall man opened the door, wearing a featureless white mask. He silently held out a bowl of candy. The boys hesitated, then took some, thanking him nervously. When Jacob turned back for one last look, the man was still standing in the doorway, unmoving, the porch light flickering above him. The next morning, police tape surrounded the house. The owner, a retired teacher named Mr. Langley, had died inside his living room 2 days earlier. Neighbors said no one lived there after that night. Security footage later showed something impossible: the porch light flicking on by itself, and the front door slowly creaking open, with no one behind it. Story 2. The Pumpkin Patch. In 2020, a small town in Ohio hosted its annual Halloween festival at a local pumpkin patch. Families came to pick pumpkins, take photos, and enjoy warm cider. That year, a new attraction was a deer-haunted maze through the far field. Said to be built by a local artist named Benjamin Cross. As the sun set, visitors began entering the maze, laughing and screaming as actors jumped out to scare them. But after midnight, something went wrong. A group of teens never came out. Volunteers searched for hours until they reached the maze's center, where they found something horrifying: 7 scarecrows lined up, each wearing a different Halloween costume. When police arrived, they discovered that 3 of the scarecrows weren't props at all. They were the missing teens. Cross disappeared the same night, leaving his truck and wallet behind. The pumpkin patch was abandoned after the investigation. Locals say that every Halloween, scarecrows reappear in the field, even though no one has planted pumpkins there in years. Story 3. The Costume That Moved. In 2021, a young woman named Melissa worked at a Halloween store in California. The shop was known for its realistic props and costumes, especially one that stood near the entrance, a tall Grim Reaper figure with glowing red eyes. Every night after closing, Melissa would lock up and set the motion sensors. One evening, the alarm went off at 2 a.m. when the owner checked the security footage. He saw the Grim Reaper prop move. It turned its head slowly toward the camera, then walked a few steps forward before the screen went black. They dismissed it as a glitch until the next night, when the same alarm triggered again. This time, police found the back door wide open and the Grim Reaper missing. Days later, the mannequin was found outside the store, propped against a tree with its scythe covered in dried blood. No fingerprints, no tracks, and no explanation were ever found. The store shut down a month later. The owner said the props manufacturer never existed. Story 4. The Trick-or-Treat Bag. In 2018, a family in Colorado was sorting through their kids' Halloween candy when they found something that didn't belong. Amid the chocolate bars and lollipops was a small black velvet pouch. Inside was a folded photograph of a little boy, pale, unsmiling, with "Help Me" scrawled on the back in pencil. The parents assumed it was a sick joke, but when they tried to trace where it came from, none of the neighbors recognized the pouch. A few days later, their 6-year-old daughter began talking to someone in her room at night. When asked, she said, "The boy from the bag wants to come inside." Terrified, her parents burned the pouch and photo. The very next night, they found muddy footprints leading from their porch to her bedroom window. Nothing was taken, but the window frame was cracked open. The family moved away a month later. The police never found who left the photo or why. Story 5: The Abandoned School Party. In 2022, a group of college students broke into an abandoned high school to film a Halloween vlog. The school had been closed for a decade due to structural instability, but its classrooms were still filled with dusty desks and faded decorations. They brought cameras, flashlights, and costumes, joking that they'd summon ghosts for extra views. As they explored, they found the gym decorated with old Halloween banners, black and orange streamers hanging from the ceiling. The eerie part: the decorations were new. In the middle of the floor stood a table set with melted candles, candy bowls, and 7 chairs. The students assumed another group had set it up until one of the cameras caught something strange. In the corner of the footage, a figure in a Letterman jacket was sitting in one of the chairs, head down. When they turned around, the chair was empty. Panicking, they fled the building. Later, when they reviewed the video, they realized the figure had been sitting there the entire time motionless, until the last second when it looked directly into the lens. Story 6: The House That Reappeared. In 2017, in a quiet suburb of Pennsylvania, a group of teens discovered an old Victorian house that wasn't supposed to exist. It stood at the end of a road that usually ended in a wooded area. On Halloween night, the house was suddenly their lights on, porch decorated with pumpkins, and music faintly playing from inside. They decided to explore, assuming it was part of a new haunted attraction. But once inside, everything looked too real: the smell of food, the flicker of a fireplace, the sound of laughter upstairs. They called out, but no one answered. When they turned to leave, the front door was gone. Only a wall stood in its place. The lights flickered, and the music distorted into static. Then, one of the teens screamed he saw faces staring from the wallpaper, like they were pressed behind it. They eventually escaped through a broken window, cutting their arms and legs in the process. The next day, when they returned with police, the house was gone. Only a patch of dirt remained, as if nothing had ever stood there. Story 7: The Final Call. In 2023, a 911 dispatcher named Eric was working the night shift on Halloween. Most calls that night were pranks or noise complaints until 11:57 p.m., when he received one that chilled him to the core. The caller was a young girl, whispering frantically, saying someone was in her house. Eric tried to keep her calm, asking for her address. She whispered it, but the location didn't exist on the system. The signal was faint, distorted, as if coming from another time. Eric stayed on the line, listening as the girl said, "He's coming up the stairs." Then, silence. He heard footsteps, heavy breathing, and finally a door creaking open before the call ended. He immediately traced the signal manually. The address, once cross-checked, revealed something terrifying. The house had burned down in 1994. The girl who lived there had died inside. When Eric replayed the recording later, he noticed something else. Just before the line cut out, a man's voice whispered clearly, "Thank you for listening."